words, they were baptized with the Spirit at that point. Well, Peter and the other Jews with him were astounded with this. That now the Gentiles are getting the same thing that we got on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. Now he's got to go up to Jerusalem and face the other Jewish apostles. And the word of what he had done got there before he got there. And they were loaded for bear for Peter when he had arrived. And they really rebuked him. Don't you know, as a Jew, you're never to go in the home of a Gentile. Why did you do that? And Peter explained everything that had happened there. And in Acts chapter 11, verses 15 and 16, this is very critical because this helps, again, determine when did the church begin historically. Peter explained to the Jewish apostles there in Jerusalem what happened when he presented the gospel at Cornelius' home. Quote, "And as I began to speak, the Holy Spirit fell upon them as upon us at the beginning." That word beginning is very critical. By the beginning, it talks about what happened in Acts chapter 2 to the Jewish believers that were there when the Spirit of God was poured out upon them. As I was speaking in the home of this Gentile, the Spirit of God was poured out upon them as upon us at the beginning. And Peter says, "Then I remembered the word of the Lord, how he said, John indeed baptized with water, but you shall be baptized with the Holy Spirit." Notice Peter calls what happened at Pentecost as the beginning. Well, the beginning of what? The beginning of the church. And according to the Theological Dictionary of New Testament, the word that he used there for the beginning denotes beginning in the exact sense. In other words, this was the beginning of something that had never been here before. Never before. The language of this clearly indicates the church came into existence on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. It was not here in the world before that time whatsoever. Now other things indicate this too. Ephesians 2, verses 13 through 16. Ephesians 2, verses 13 through 16. Paul indicated that Christ's death made it possible for Jews and Gentiles to come together to make, quote, one new man. He's saying this is a result of Christ's death. He clearly indicated this is a result of Christ's death. It made it possible for Jews and Gentiles who formerly were enemies of each other. It removed the wall of enmity between Jew and Gentile and brought them together as equals to form one new man. And again, the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament word says that the word translated new there in the expression one new man refers, quote, to what is new and distinctive as compared with other things, what is new in nature, different from the usual, new in kind. What he's saying is that as a result of Christ's death and then resurrection, God brought something brand new into existence upon planet Earth that had never been here. Never anything of its kind had been here before this time. And it's where he could take former enemies, remove hatred and enmity from them, Jew and Gentile, as well as both of them placing their faith in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That God, through that means, could bring them together as one, something brand new that had never been here in the world before. Again, indicate the church was not here until the day of Pentecost, the day of Pentecost. Ephesians 2, verses 19 and 20. Ephesians 2, verses 19 and 20. Paul taught that the church was built upon the foundation of the apostles and New Testament prophets. Now, in Ephesians 2, he's talking about the church being built like a building is built. And he's saying that the church was built upon the foundation of the apostles and New Testament prophets. Now, what's the first thing that's laid of a building? The foundation. That's laid first. And then superstructure is built on top of that. And so what he's saying is that this indicates the church did not exist before the time of the apostles and New Testament prophets. Because the church was built upon that foundation of the apostles and New Testament prophets. Ephesians 3, verses 3 through 6. Ephesians 3, verses 3 through 6. Paul indicated that God did not reveal knowledge concerning the church. God did not reveal knowledge concerning the church until the time of the apostles and New Testament prophets. In other words, there's no reference to the church anywhere in the Old Testament. It wasn't until the time of the apostles and New Testament prophets that God began revealing knowledge concerning the church, this new entity that he brought into existence. Acts chapter 20, verse 28. Acts chapter 20, verse 28. Paul declared that Christ purchased the church of God with his own blood. Christ purchased the church of God with his own blood. And according to Arndon Gingrich, the word translated purchase means to acquire, to obtain, or to gain for oneself. In other words, the church was not acquired. It was not obtained until Jesus Christ shed his blood on the cross of Calvary. Not before he shed his blood, but as a result of his shedding blood on the cross of Calvary. That the church is obtained or is acquired. Matthew 16, verse 18, Christ said, I will build my church. And again, according to the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, the future tense verb translated will build in Jesus' statement denotes an eschatological act of Christ, a new authorization by God, indicating that the Messiah will build the new community, that Jesus would build the new community. And because he used the future tense, it was indicated the church was not in existence when he made that statement. It wasn't in existence yet. It would come into existence in the future. It would be a whole new community. Ephesians 1, verses 20 through 23. Ephesians 1, verses 20 through 23, Paul indicates that God raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places and gave him to be head over all things to the church, which is his body. What he's saying is, it's not until Jesus rose from the dead and ascended to heaven 10 days before Pentecost, and when he ascended to heaven, sat down at the right hand of God the Father in heaven, it's not until then that God appointed him to be head over all things to the church, which is his body. Now, think of the analogy here. Since a body cannot exist without its head, this indicates the church did not exist before Christ ascended to heaven and sat down at the right hand of God the Father and was appointed by God to be the head over the church, which is his body. And we give you some other references there that fit in line with that. So in light of all this, this is the dispensational theology viewpoint about the church. When did it begin? Dispensationalism teaches there's no revelation concerning the church in the Old Testament. The church did not exist in Old Testament times. It was born on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. And therefore the church and Israel are not the same. They are not the same. Israel in Old Testament times was not part of the church. They're two totally distinct entities, and God has two distinct purposes and programs for them. One for the Israel and another for the church. And what's intriguing is there are implications in Revelation 21 and 22 that talk about the future eternal state, that there will continue to be distinctions between the church and Israel even throughout eternity. Even throughout eternity. And let me just briefly talk about this. When John, after the present heavens and earth are destroyed and a new heavens and earth are created, John in Revelation 21 sees the New Jerusalem coming down from the new heaven to the new eternal earth to be the capital city here upon planet Earth. And the New Jerusalem is called there the bride or wife of the Lamb. Well, in the Bible, who is the bride of Christ? The church. That implies that the New Jerusalem, the capital city of the new eternal earth, is where the church will dwell as the wife of Jesus, who's going to dwell in that New Jerusalem. on the new eternal earth. But then the New Jerusalem is also called the tabernacle of God.